design in general, as well as database design within Dataverse. It's important to know the concept of database design before we start creating um, apps, if you will. And not only that, knowing the techniques, but and the limitations of applying the same techniques in Dataverse. All right, so we'll talk about it. And I think this lesson will be beneficial for folks who may be starting on Dataverse. Maybe you're coming from like an Excel uh, um, file development or even an Excel database system to Dataverse or Access for that matter, or even a SharePoint list. I think it'll be important for us to explore a few things here. All right. So that is the goal. We'll talk about concepts, then we'll talk about limitations within the Dataverse. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Victor Dantas. I'm a Microsoft MVP. And one of the persons that really have helped me in the journey, give me encouragement time and time again, is Ras Chowdhury. Thank you so much, Ras, for your support, but I thank you more for your friendship, my friend. Really appreciate it. I'm also an ambassador for the Power Community, formerly known as Dynamics 365 Saturday. We've been doing events for the last few years, mostly in-person events, and it was a part of my career that I really loved. So hopefully 2022 will be an year marked by in-person events again. All right. There you have my QR code, the QR code for my blog and other social network links. I encourage you to connect, send me questions. If I can help you, I'll reply. If I don't have the answers, I'll point you to someone who knows the answer, okay? So the plan for today is we'll talk about what is a database first, then we'll look at design considerations. I'll give you a little bit of a few pointers on what I use in my design sessions. Then how to implement the design in Dataverse, and then we'll talk a little bit about form design, app design, and then Q&A at the end. All right. I don't want to rush the session, so if you have questions, we may take it depending on how we're doing time. We may take it in the middle of the sessions, and we'll go from there. All right. So what is a database? So a database, in summary, is a collection of structured information. And we can use different terminology when it comes to information. We can call it data, information, so on and so forth. Typically, a database is electronically managed. So it's an electronic mean by which we capture information and organize in a way that's easier to read and present later on. Historically, databases have evolved from just plain text files to spreadsheets, and then a combination of these spreadsheets together, so on and so forth. The most common format of databases that are used today are relational databases, and this is how the Dataverse is built. Now, Dataverse is not plainly a database. So, and this is one of the things that I most love about the Dataverse is that by designing your data, you get both the data and an application right from the get-go. I am a developer by trade. I came into the market way back when in 1997. And at the time, we had to design the database and then write the application on top of the database before we could, add data to that database or read data from it. And Microsoft has been really keen in enhancing that particular story. So, from Visual Basic to other tools, they have made our lives easier when it comes to creating business applications. All right. Now, there are other types of databases that we won't talk about it now, but you have, NoSQL databases who have been popular lately. But we'll stick to relational database because that's the setup for the Dataverse. Okay. Now, when you are designing a database, what are the considerations that you have to make? The first one is, what is the database for? You know, we have to conceptually be able to state why we are creating this particular database. Is it a database that stores customer information? Are you trying to do just customer information management? Or are you doing customer relationship management? Or is it for sales? Is it for events management? So on and so forth. We need to be able to put it in one sentence what the database is created for, okay? And that will help us really control scope creep when we are defining a database. I mean, if folks are coming from the Excel world or even a SharePoint list, usually the SharePoint list is limited to a data element or a piece of information. So in one list, you have information about a customer. And the same for Excel, unless you use different sheets. But even for that matter, the sheets, they are not related to each other easily, right? This, in the same fashion that a SharePoint list is not easily related to another. So in a database, we have to identify what the database is for, make sure that it's not singular enough, meaning, am I storing just one piece of information here? If you do, then you really don't need a relational database. All right, so that's first and foremost. Once you know what you're creating this database for, you should then look into subject related or subject based information and try to aggregate the information into different subjects. In turn, what those subjects will give you is the amount of tables that you have to create in your database to reduce redundant data or data duplication. Okay. Now, when you're designing a database, it's also important to identify how the data relates to each other. So if I'm creating a database for events management, of course I'll have a list of events, and there are dates that are and attributes to those events, but also I have events participants. So I have one bucket, if you will, or one container that will store event information, and then I have another one that will store a list of people who are attending a particular event. Same fashion within an event, if the event has multiple sessions or tracks, I'll have a list of those, and that relates to the event, but it's not a part of how we would classify an event. And uh, one way to get to that particular to make a differentiation between what is information that belongs to a particular container versus relation that or information that relates to a piece of information is asking the question, when I talk about an event, um, give me information that gives me attributes or characteristics of that particular event. Okay, the location is one, the date that the event will take place, maybe a description of that event, so on and so forth. Now, if I talk about what composes an event, which sessions I should add to this event. Now I'm talking about relationship. Who's going to participate on that event? Who's going to be a speaker to that event? So those are information that relates, but are not necessarily attributes of the event itself. So it's important to break those out into containers before you actually start creating those things in Dataverse or any other database, okay? So the other consideration that we want to look at when we're talking about database is how the information will be organized to provide value to me. So if I have to go to one table, to another table, to three other tables, and do some formatting to extract the information that I need, then the database was not well designed. So those are the things that we have to keep in mind, all right? Okay, database design. I call it the database design liftoff. It's a 7-step process that I use. We'll talk about the first 4. They are more conceptual, and then the 3 last are more technical, if you will. We talked about defining the purpose of the database already. The second one was finding and organizing the information required. And being quite honest with you folks, I use a piece of paper during the process. A lot of times, you know, if I'm talking with a customer, if it's an online meeting, then I use a electronic whiteboard, and then we kind of hash things out. But this process does not really rely on a technology to do it. I saw that my friends Chris Huntington and Nanti, they use a diagram, an UML diagram, to come up with these definitions. You can use that as well. I like to use papers. It frees my mind from, you know, typing a little bit and being in front of the computer. But the point I want to make is that these steps can be done without the use of a particular tool or technology. All right. So once you have finished step 2, you start dividing the information as you aggregated it into tables, and then you start breaking out these tables into columns. Now, when you are defining columns or attributes or fields, you see the terminology used, this terminology used interchangeably. You wanna you wanna make sure that you are selecting or defining the best data type for each column. I'll give you an example. I have a workshop in my garage, and I try to use cabinets to store different types of tools. I live in Canada. The seasons are very well defined in Canada, and I know that a particular cabinet will not, or the items within a particular cabinet will not be used in a specific season. So I'll give you an example. I have tools in a cabinet for gardening. Those tools will not be used in the winter time. Okay, and the same is true if I have, you know, snow shoveling and things that I use in the winter. I don't have it in the same cabinet as the tools that I use in spring and summer, right? So think about this concept with aggregating your information into tables. You know, you want to place the information in a container that is logical and will be used for a specific purpose. If you have everything in the same place, then when you need to find information, it's going to be a pain to get to what you want. Now, I opened one of my cabinets, and in this cabinet, I have a bunch of hammers, right? I have a lightweight hammer, I have a big one when I'm doing demolition, so on and so forth. So depending on where I place these tools in my cabinet, I will use caution when I try to retrieve it. So think about this usage of caution when you define data types, all right? If I know that I'm going to store a date field, or my information is of type date, I am not going to define that column as a text column, because when I'm about to use that information, now I have to use different types of caution to ensure that I can pick up that tool or that information, right? If I'm dealing with nails, very sharp ones or very sharp too, I know what I'm dealing with, so I'm going to use a specific way to reach out and grab that information. So I don't have to put different gloves, I don't have to put a mask, I don't have to do all this kind of crazy stuff to get a nail that it's not as dangerous as a razor. So my point is, when you define your table and you start creating your columns, make sure you use the proper data types so that you know what type of caution, if you will, you need to use when reading data. All right, so that is the point. If you're dealing with a currency value, you don't want to store that as text, because then the time that you have to read from that particular column, you now have to cast it into a currency value, and then you have to test it before casting to make sure that it's not going to throw an exception on your program. So far, so good. If it's good, you can put a comment, do whatever. Just let me know that you're following through. All right, and you understand my analogies. I hope it's working well for you. All right, and then the next 3 steps, they are more technical in a sense than it is conceptual. You have to look at each piece of data. So you define your tables, and your tables have columns. And now we're going to look at the at samples of what's going to be stored in the tables to define a few things here. The first thing is primary key. I have to look into my table and say, when I look at this table, what tells me that this particular row is unique is this one value. And then that becomes in turn your primary key. Now I'm talking about database design. I'm not yet talking about database design in Dataverse. So don't throw rocks yet. we'll get there when we get there. All right. So you have to identify what are your primary keys or the information that will tell you that this particular row is unique. Okay. If you're looking at a student, or even if we are talking about a sales management application, there should be some sort of account number that identifies your customer or customer number, something that's unique to that customer. When somebody says, I'm dealing with customer 12345, we know that they're talking about a particular customer of yours. If you have two customers with the same number, now the table wasn't well thought of and the primary keys were not well defined. Here in North America, primary key for an individual, for a person, it's usually in the States, it's the social security number. In Canada is the social insurance number. And I think in other countries you have different numbers. In Brazil is CPF, so on and so forth. So that that ensures that the information in that table is unique. Okay, so we need to know that. The second thing we want to look at is relationships. So how does this one table that I'm dealing with now relates to other information? So if I have a sales management application, I have my customers, and customers have orders, and orders have details to it, which products are part of those orders, so on and so forth. So in this example, you can see relationship between three tables. You have one customer that can have multiple orders, and orders have multiple details or multiple products associated with it. So it's important to know how data relates to each other. And then finally, once your initial design is done, and again, it can be done on paper if you want, you can do this on Excel, you can use it whatever. Eduardo Bonato said, paper UML, we should patent that. You can use whatever you feel comfortable with. I like paper, all right? I stay in front of the computer way too long, so every chance I get to step out, I do that. So once your database design is done, you're gonna refine your design using normalization rules. So you're gonna look at what you have created so far, table by table, column by column, and then you are going to apply these three normalization rules that we're going to talk about. The first normalization rule is that you want to make sure that a field or attribute or column does not hold more than one piece of information. You've been in places where somebody said, I'm creating a database, but I don't want to create a bunch of columns. Let's just put all the values into one column, and then we break it apart with a pipe or a comma. That's a bad idea, all right? I know that there is one data type in the Dataverse that stores data that way. I'm not going to pick that fight today, but overall, it's a bad practice to aggregate information in the same column and break it out through, pipes or comma, whatever character of choice. So after you create your design, you apply the first rule. If you see columns that are storing multiple information within itself, you probably want to create different columns. All right. The second normal form is that a column in a table should be 100% related to the primary keys in that particular table. I'll give you an example. So if you have a system that's logging information about students, and one of the tables that you created is student class, to log, the classes that student is enrolled to. And within that table, you, of course, you'd have a column that's a reference to the class and another column that's a reference to the student. If you have a third column there that has student name, then you have broken the second rule, the second normalization rule. First name or last name or the name of the student should never be on that related table because it pertains to the student itself. It should be part of the student table alone. And because you have a reference to that second table, you can then read the name of the student. All right. So that is the second rule. The information, a column needs to be meaningful to the primary key in which that column, in which table that column exists. All right. It shouldn't happen that you have a column that will, in essence, store duplicate data. All right. The third column, it's somewhat similar to the second one, but not the third column, sorry, the third rule, it's very similar to the second one, but what it says is you should not have a column on your table in which the value relies on another column that relates to a third one. So other product table example, you have an order, you have a product, you have the product price, and now you have a discount column that depends on another field that exists elsewhere that's not part of the primary key. Now, I'm talking about database design here. I'm not talking about database design for Dataverse yet. Sometimes we have to break these rules in Dataverse just because of limitation of the Dataverse, how it works. But as a good practice, when you prepare your design, the conception, go through the 3 rules to make sure that you can refine your database before you get to Dataverse. All right. All right. Next here, we're gonna talk about relationship type in databases as a whole. So you have one of the most common relationship type is one-to-many. And don't mind my comments here. I guess I was just trying to be funny, but they don't relate to these relationships. So you have one-to-many. The one-to-many is a parent-child relationship where, for one parent, you can have one or more child records, if you will. So you have a customer that's associated to an order. So one customer can be presented to multiple orders. And then you have many-to-many, where the data, the appearance of data can happen multiple times in different combinations on either side. Student class is an example. You can have student that is member of multiple classes, and then you have classes with multiple students. So you have that multiple appearance of either record depending on how you look at it. And then you have a one-to-one relationship. Now, we used to do that a lot in regular, databases, SQL Server, Oracle. We have a way to create those. You don't have that particular relationship type in Dataverse. But when we use this, if you are designing a database for, Oracle SQL Server, SQL on Azure, so on and so forth, is essentially when you have one core table. Let's say your core table is a product table. So you're storing information about the name of the table, the name of the product, description about that product, the unit price, so on and so forth. And then you may want to create another table in that one-to-one relationship type in which you define information that's it's not always required to the existence of one product. So I'll give you an example. I sell products on Amazon. I sell anything that I think it's gonna give me a good profit. I sell it on Amazon, and Amazon is telling me now that for products that are related to health and safety, I have to provide a bunch of certification numbers, right? Now, those fields, the certification numbers, special handling instructions, and all that stuff, they are not necessarily required to other products that I sell. I sell iPhone cases, I sell other stuff. So those 3-4 fields that I have on here are not required for the other products. So instead of me creating this very large table with lots of fields that in majority will be null. And I'm not sure if you know this, but the null value also occupies space in the database, right? It's not because it's null that it's not taking storage space. So instead of creating those columns here in one big table, I create another table in which records will only be created for those products that require, health and safety details. So that's where you see one-to-one relation. It was always a pain to do this in Dynamics. You can't still achieve one-to-one. You can do one-to-many, but there are tools and ways to go around it that will facilitate the same concept. When you have a table that theoretically would require lots of columns, not all of the columns are required for that matter or used, then you can ship those columns to another table and save space that way. All right. Let's see what's next here. So this is what a one-to-many looks like. You have a supplier table, and then you have a products table. So you have a list of products, and then you see one record for supplier one, and then 3 references of that record on another table. Here to the right, you have a many-to-many example where you have orders and products, and then you have an intersect table where you log the order ID, product ID, and then unit price and the quantity for that particular order, right? And finally, you have one-to-one set up in this slide here where I have products. You see the name, description, quantity, blah, blah, blah. This quantity here is probably referring to quantity in stock. And then I have another table called product details where I store, more description, image, so on and so forth. All right, any questions so far? Let's take a quick pause before I get into Dataverse and look at other stuff. No questions, comments? Should we proceed? All right, we will proceed. Stop my presentation real quick. So next what we're going to do is we are going to navigate to Dataverse, the Maker website. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it. I would assume so. It's the end of the second the second day. If you don't know how to get here, I don't know what to do to help in that sense. But I will say that if you have observed the lessons, but you haven't yet accessed the Maker website, you can access you can Google rather Power Apps Developer Plan, and then create an environment for you where you can experiment Dataverse, automate, and other tools in the Power Platform. So just Google Power Apps Developer Plan, sign up, and then you're gonna land here eventually. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna look at is as I start to design a database, I'm gonna talk about the difference between conceptual database design and what you should do or what you could do in Dataverse. All right. So we talk about in the beginning of the lesson coming up with concepts and then parsing out information into tables and then defining columns, data types, so on and so forth. So I created all of this stuff in an Excel file. So I have an Excel file that defines the purpose of this database. The purpose for my database is to keep a list of custom information for the purpose of managing sales, producing mailing labels and reports. All right. With that, I thought that the tables that my database should include was a customer table, then a supplier table, then a product table, then I have the health safety product details, and then finally I have order and order details. All right. So I did this all using the concept that I was talking about, drawing stuff on a paper. I got to this particular setup. Some folks will prefer other details. I think this is enough to get started. All right. So the first thing we're going to look at is going back to Maker. You have to select the environment that you want to start creating your database. And I'm going to use this environment here that I already have in place. The second thing is because I want to teach you well and avoid you avoid that you start to be hated by your devs in your company. So I'll teach you the way that I would do development myself. So the first thing you want to do is create a solution for your database. Okay, even though later on you can parse a solution into others different solutions to facilitate development, I will create one only for my database. This solution I will call customer management, right? And in here, I can select the publisher. Now, I watched a demo from Rebecca, and she was playing with Dataverse for Teams today. And most of the objects that were created there had this weird prefix. One of the things you don't want your objects to have is that weird prefix, so you can go ahead and create a new publisher. I will call my publisher 0 to Hero. And again here, you can add a description. I'll add my prefix. I'll call it Hero. And then I'll save my publisher. And then in here, I can now select maybe, yeah, I can, the publisher I just created. Then you can start versioning and play with it. Okay, so now I have a solution. It's an empty container. I think Antti used the concept of a solution being a ship where you can put your objects and then send it over to a different environment or even a different tenant. So I now have my solution. It's called customer management. I can click on it. It's going to list all objects that I have available in my solution. As you can see, I don't have anything. So the next stage of defining my database is I'm going to look at the file I created. Now, if you use UML, you can look at, you can play with that on your side. But I'm going to refer to the document I created. Okay, so the first step here is for me to look at the tables that exist in my document and compare with what's available in the Dataverse. So I can do that by clicking on Add Existing, and I'm going to click on Tables. And in here, I can see that the vanilla version of my Dataverse already has a table called Account. And if you be in the marketplace, in sales specifically, accounts and customers, they point to the same thing. So I'm going to use that guy in my design. All right. So I can look at the next one. The next one is supplier. Supplier is a company. So theoretically, I could use the same table for the two data elements here, or data categories. Product. Let's see if product is available in my install. So product is not available here. So we are going to create it as a custom table. I know that other versions or other modules of Dynamics have the product tables defining them. The sales module has product, but I don't have it on my vanilla version of the plain version of Dataverse. So I'll have to create that one. Let's see if orders is here. I mean, if product is not there, orders won't be either. So I know that the only work that I'm going to save here is essentially customer and supplier. All right, so I added account to be essentially the bucket where I'm going to store customer information. So I can hit next. Next thing I can look at is what are the fields that I have in my customer table that I can then use from the out-of-the-box field listing in Dataverse. So I have number, name, address 1 and 2, city, state, postal code, and a few other fields, credit limit, so on and so forth. So we're gonna look at them one by one here. I can click on select components, then I can filter out and say, okay, is there a number here? Yes, there is a count number. Then I can look for name. Is there a name? Line 1, there is no line 1. Maybe street 1. Yeah, street 1. Let's see, street 2. City. And then I have state, postal code. So I got all address fields. The next one I have on my list here is credit limit. Credit limit. It's there as well. Let's see if there is outstanding balance. No, it's not there. So let's go with the ones we got. Notice that in my comments here, I put some notes indicating which fields I wanted to be calculated, the ones that will be auto-generated numbers, so on and so forth. All right, so I selected the existing fields to be added to my solution. I can now add it here and hit add. And I have covered the customer and supplier tables in my design. The next one I have is product. So I'm gonna hit new, table name is product. All right, I can look at advanced options. You see that it added my prefix. Should I not add the publisher, it would put that weird CR, blah, 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 onto my, the schema name for my field. All right, you can select whether, what type of table this is, if it's a standard, activity, and virtual. I'm not gonna get into it. You can use standard for now. Record ownership. Now, Dynamics has, or Dataverse for that matter, sorry, has this concept of record assignment. You can have a list of records and you can decide, okay, we're going to review this information. I want to assign it to this person in the organization, or, you know, all the customers in Calgary, Alberta, I want this team to play with. So if you select organization, there is no concept of record ownership, so everything sees everything in that matter, unless you say this team should not see any of the records at all. If you use record ownership, then you can control who can see what based on which team they work for as well. There's some information here that we'll not talk about today, but there is more to learn in terms of features available when you're creating tables. So I'm ready to click to save my table. And what's going to happen now is the Maker website is going to show me an UI in which I can use to create columns. All right. So now I can open product. You see that there's a bunch of fields that were already created for me, one of it being the name. So in my design, when I look at products, there is already something that I should use as the name of the product. I missed that one column. So product name is a string 50, yes. All right. But Dynamics or Dataverse has already created a name column as a primary column. Dataverse will use this primary name column. In the documentation, you see that it referred as alternative or alternate key as well. It will use this field to index the data, essentially to make it faster when you are querying data. If for some reason you need to index your table using another column, you can always create different keys here for index as well, if you're dealing with massive amounts of data. All right, so it's there. So for my product now, looking at my documentation, I can create other fields. So let's create another column. We're gonna create the description column. Oops. And I want it to be of type multi-line text. And I can expand this and say I want 5,000 characters as the max length, and it's optional. So I can hit done. Now note that my columns are displayed in bold here. Reason being is because I haven't saved my table. If you're using the classic UI, every time you create a new field or column, it pushes that create operation to the back end, and therefore it's a little slower in terms of executing that operation. In here, you can create all of your fields and then save at the end. I try to limit creating or saving my records to like 5 to 10 columns. Reason being is because this is all running on a web browser. You don't want to spend spend time to create 50 fields and not save it, and then when you hit save, your internet connection go down, and then now you have to repeat creating all 50 fields once again. So I try to limit my scope to 5 to 10 fields at a time. So I'm gonna create another one. The next one is unit price, and the type here is going to be currency. Now I saw, Pranav, that you were asking the difference between floating point and a decimal. There is a definition in range that is different, and also precision is different between the two. All right, so let me go back to currency. So my currency, I'm gonna leave 0 to this amount of money as well, and I hit OK. Somebody may ask, Victor, why instead of creating this as a currency field, why don't you create it as a decimal value? Reason being is because Dataverse manages multiple currency really well. And if you use a currency field, you have the opportunity to establish rates, currency rate, and it will calculate the unit price in the particular currency that you're dealing with, and then the base price if your base currency is USD or United States dollar for that matter. So that's why it's preferable to use unit price. Okay, so I created the columns that I need for product. Maybe we create another one. Let's do number, product number. I can scroll down. There is an auto number. You can do a prefix. So I'll do, my prefix is prod, and this is what it will look like. Okay. Now this particular pattern can be changed using a little bit of code when you create it. Maybe you want to do some sort of calculation to define if products of this type, I want to use a different prefix. I don't want my counter to start at 1000, I want to start at 0, so on and so forth. You can change that, but it does include a little bit of code to get it done. All right. Now that I created my table, the next thing I would do here is create forms. Okay. So one of the forms, one of the rules that I use for designing forms is grouping information together that makes sense, and always presenting information on the form that's used the most. Required fields, grouping them together where they make sense, and then leaving the optional fields to the end. So that is another strategy that I use. So the form is ready to go. I have a name. I can throw the description, very simple form for that matter, and then I can put the price, unit price. So I got everything that I need on this form. I can save. publish, and then my form is done and ready to go. So now I can go back and then move forward with my design. I think though in this exercise I will only create one more table, and then we'll spend more time taking questions and discussing concepts. All right. All right. The next table I will create is the health and safety product details. I'll just call it short. I'll call it product details, or detail, and details in plural. You can define what the primary column will be. This field will be there, but we won't use, so it's lost information. Yep, so let's save. So now I can click on my table, and I'll create a single column here and call it special handling. Okay, this guy will be a multi-line text as well. And let's do 5,000 again. All right, save the table. Sorry, I forgot to create one more column. I need a reference here to my product. So the column is called product of type lookup, and it's going to be a required field pointing to product. That's done. I will save that. Actually, I need to go back to special handling. I need to make it required. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for this table to exist. If I have a bunch of rows that doesn't have special handling, and we only have this table for the purpose of managing special handling. So my table is saved. I can now go back to product, forms, open my form, and then I need to add the product field to my form and special handling down here. This field I'll hide because we don't need it. Save and publish. All right, so theoretically though, in terms of design, I have my database with customers, I have another table for product, and I have another table for product details. In this setup though, the relationship between product and product details, it's one to many, but in concept, I can only have one line with special handling for one particular product. So how do we manage this in Dynamics now that I have the option or the opportunity to create multiple rows of special handling? I want to ensure that I provide UI to limit the creation of special handling or product details for one existing product. The way I did this in the past, and I'm going to show this on another implementation, is using a PCF control called form lookup form, if I'm not mistaken. All right. In the particular example, we had a implementation where opportunities in Dynamics were translated to financial loans, right? And there could be only one opportunity per loan, right? So if you look at this loan form, I now have this tab for documents, and in here you are seeing information from the opportunity as if we are looking at the opportunity record, the singular opportunity record, okay? So in terms of relationship, again, you have opportunity here that is associated with loans, and it's a one opportunity to many loans in terms of the data structure. But in essence, I can only present one opportunity can be associated to one loan record itself. Now, in the past in Dynamics, you didn't have this particular component that you could pull information from the parent to the same form. So what you did is you had a lookup field here that you had to click on the lookup field and navigate away to the secondary form. I am presenting information about the parent, even related information to the parent, in the same form as the child record. And if this form was not read-only, the users would be allowed to make changes to the parent record from here. So let me show you how it's done. Okay. When you look at a form, the first thing you need to do is you need to design a form that has the fields that you want, a parent form that has only the fields that you want to expose in the child record. And this is what I've got here in the classic UI. I have one form that has the opportunity name, loan amount, and I have a listing of documents, a SharePoint location of documents, right? So that is simple enough. You create your form. Only thing you have to take note is you need to copy the ID of this form, which is available here on this UI. You can use any website that decode URLs to retrieve the form ID. All right. So once you have the form ID, you can go to the child record or to the child form that you're playing with. So let's go here. I'm going to go to the loan table, open the form that I'm playing with. Come on. Okay. And then I navigate to the lookup field. You see I have this lookup field. You see this name documents? That is this tab. Okay. So in design, there isn't a bunch of stuff or fields in this loan form, as you can see it well here. You have one field called opportunity. It's a lookup field. You can then click on change properties. And then you're going to go to the last tab here in the property changes. If this ever comes back, go to controls. Then you register this form component control. Click on it. I'm going to load the lookup value. What is the type for that value? And then you're going to enter this particular string here. I'm going to put it on a notepad so you can see it better. All right. So the XML notation here is fairly simple. Only different thing is the entity name or the type, the ID of the form, and then this other notation. Let me format it this a bit better so that it's easy for us to understand. All right, so far so good, everybody? I think so. All right, so this is what I'm using to facilitate that one-to-one relationship. And now you have the parent data presented here. So conceptually, think about it this way. In one form, in that form details, I now have information about the product, what is its name, the supplier, the price, and I also have the fields for the special handling details, all in the same place. And then you can do things like JavaScript on the form load to use one form versus the other. But then you resolve the issue of not being able to use one-to-one relationship in the Dataverse. All right. So we are about 5 minutes away from the end of the session. I wish we could go further here. There is a lot more when it comes to database design in the Dataverse, but I want to give you time for questions if you have them, and then I have a special announcement after this as well. So do we have any questions in the chat window, Russ? Anybody with hands raised, anything?
Hi, so the first question by Sachin is which credentials we should use to access, oh, sorry, that's something else. So are there any questions here that are relevant to this session? What's the difference between floating point number and decimal number column data types, please?
Okay, so between floating and decimal, you have a difference in range, and you have difference in precision as well. So that's where you see most difference between the two.
Angie is asking, I'd like to get a copy of your template, please.
All right, we'll send it. We'll send it over to you.
So,
all right, I think
Scott
that's it.
Sewell saying, great job, wonderful job, everyone. Cheryl saying, exceptionally well explained. As always, Mallory saying it's a great session. Angie's asking the Excel template. Iqbal saying excellent session. Thank you, Victor, by Angie. Oh, here we go. A final question. We have a question from Dehir, who's asking, can I export a Dataverse table into a C# class?
Okay, I think you're referring if you can generate like a code based on a Dataverse table schema. You can. My a colleague here in the community called Daryl Labar. He has an utility that generates generates C# classes based on Dataverse schema. So yeah, that's a good resource. We used to call it, or we still call it, like early bound, C# objects. So you can look him up. It's Daryl Labar. We joke all the time. We say that he's always raising Labar for us in terms of code. So yeah, you can look him up. There'll be information there. So Raz, I mean, if this is done and over, I just want to let folks know the Power Community is doing an event in Dallas. Dustin Dormerez is managing that event. It's gonna be in 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, in 2 weeks. I'll be there in Dallas, December the 3rd, presenting on portals, my favorite topic of them all. I would love to see you there. I think the event's gonna go online as well, but I'll be there in person. So if you live in the Dallas area, it would be great to meet you there. There is another MVP also joining us, and a bunch of other speakers who are presenting on this event that will be there as well. So, and then the other thing, Russ, is I I think you probably felt the same way as I did. I mean, when it comes to Dataverse, one day, maybe 2 days is probably not enough to cover the whole thing. If especially if we are going a slower pace, right? So the Power Community is running a 3 month long mentorship program on Dataverse, and we are doing that across the globe. So covering pretty much all time zones. We are doing that in 5 languages, if I'm not mistaken. So English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Hebrew. Arpit is doing one in India. I'm not sure which languages he's gonna pick, but there you have it. So there is a group pretty much close to you, to where you live. It'll be nice if you could join us there as well. You can scan the QR code there and register. The cool thing about the event, or this mentorship program, we have Microsoft and partners join forces with us. So we'll be giving books away during the mentorship, and Microsoft is also going to give certification vouchers to the most engaged students. So it's gonna be amazing. And then another commitment that we got from partners is that if you're looking for jobs, depending on how the program goes and how you do your engagement in the program, there is a bunch of companies who are interested in talking with you for potential employment. So to me, it's a win-win situation. I think if you want to take part in it, join us, scan the QR code, register, tell your friends. I'd love to see you around in one of the sessions. All right.
Thank you once again, Victor, for that. So it's obviously, oh, there we go. There's the information. Thank you, Victor. So that begins next week. Is that correct?
No. This one we're gonna wait until January. For next week, it's registration. Registration is open. We'll probably leave it open just until Christmas, and then we'll close it up. All right.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to let everyone get a little bit of rest before tomorrow, for the last day of the Dataverse Summit, which is the developer track. So I think that's a great opportunity for everyone to get a rest. So any final comments, Victor, before we close off for today?
Well, I just want to thank folks for being here. Really, really appreciate connecting with you. I want to thank you, Raz, for putting together these events. I mean, we know that it's hard to coordinate everything, and you've been doing this so well and always with a good attitude. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor and Scott and Cheryl and all the speakers for making this happen. And we'll see you all tomorrow. So take care, guys.
All
May
right,
the
take care.
power be with you all. Godspeed. See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye bye.